Cocos nucifera, the only living species of the Cocos genus, referred to as the tree of life, providing food, medicine, building material, cosmetics, fuel, and comedy.
Dr. Coconut.
With cultural significance being used by humans all over the world, we can see that coconuts are incredibly versatile and iconic. However, when it comes to animation, there's one character whose name brings shivers up any cartoon lover's spine, being able to create life, food, building material, fuel, and comedy. And today, we're going to his fruit salad island.
Coconut Fred. Fruit Salad Island.
However, we're not there yet. The year is 1997. The Warner Bros. Television Network, or the WB, has a giant success on their hands: Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
You have fruit punch mouth.
What?
Not only being a hit critically, but also capturing their intended teen demographic. The WB became a legitimate contender for what to watch as a teenager in the late 90s. Dawson's Creek, Felicia D, Smallville, the network wanted to capture the attention of young teenagers in the way that Fox Network began to seek an older audience demographic. The Los Angeles Times writes, armed with a plan as clever as any designed by wisecracking Bugs Bunny, Kids WB hopes to draw in the kiddie audiences from the big boy networks. It has called in a loan, scooped into the vault, brought a video game insect to life, and created shows with the biggest names in Hollywood. The current lineup on the WB network features Animaniacs, late of Fox Kids Network, and its spin-off Pinky and the Brain, the Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries, a new take on the Warner Bros. Standards, and the wily, if gross, Earthworm Jim, which crawled to the top of video game charts. Certainly the shiniest stars on the schedule are the three shows bearing industry powerhouse Steven Spielberg's name: Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain, and Freakazoid. Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment co-produces the shows with Warner Bros. Animation. Kids WB executives are as enthusiastic about wooing kid audiences as the exclamation point at the end of the fledgling program label's name. The article would end with WB Network head Jamie Kellner stating, "I believe that in the next 5 years, we can become the leader in children's programming, and that's our goal in terms of quality and viewership level." Although it would take some time since its 1995 launch, Kids WB would make a break in the market by creating a United States source to watch anime. English dubs of Pokemon, Astro Boy, Yu-Gi-Oh!, and so much more would help it in its competition against other networks, actually beating Fox Kids with its own animated lineup. However, either due to its events being lost to the sands of time via lack of a fan conversation, support, or actually being a static and uneventful channel, it appears that this was the high point for the programming block, as it would discontinue its morning block by September 2001, replacing it with locally produced shows and infomercials. By 2005, the weekday afternoon Kids WB block would not only be discontinued, but by the request of local affiliate stations, as it becomes financially not sound, due to many stations wanting to capture the attentions of older audiences. I present this context to show that Kids WB had a high and then a low, and didn't appear to make a commercial comeback. Through this same year, 2005, we'd have Don Oriello, artist, musician, and writer, team up with Sammy Aridi to develop a show. As stated in the Encyclopedia of American Animated Television, it says, "The peaceful existence of Fruit Salad Island is disrupted by the unruly and frantic Coconut Fred, who is able to make real anything he imagines in his head. In preparation for this rise and fall, the team here has reached out to co-creator Sammy Aridi and prepared an interview about Coconut Fred, their experiences on working on the show, and the process of working with big companies like Kids WB. He was very forthcoming about the experience of making an animated show, especially entering a new field that he hasn't had that much experience before.
Just to ask a question, what did it feel like to just step into animation and all that? Like, were you like nervous at all to step right into animation to start developing shows and such?
Yeah, because I'm around all these people that have huge credits and are doing all this stuff, these executives, and you know, I'm just a creative guy. I'm an idea guy. Google my name, you'll see all the different things that I've been involved in that are just like original ideas. So as a producer of IP, I create something and I partner it with someone who does something else to bring it to life. We all get in the boat that we have for 10 years sitting in the vault are fresh ideas in a pitch to someone new that we're meeting that is looking for something like that. You know, if someone says, I'm looking for a mafia type of spoof on The Sopranos. I go, well, you know what? Let me go. I think I got something like that.
Then you brought them their gavones
Right.
and such.
Yeah, you bring it out, whatever it is they're looking for.
While Don Ariely is also known for overseeing the Felix Cat cartoon franchise after his father passed in 1985, like Sammy, a lot of his public achievements come from the music industry. Don owns and operates the Ariely Guitar Company, started his own record label, and has won awards in art, writing, and music. Sammy already has started his first band at 14 years old, performing in various nightclubs throughout the late 70s and 80s.
And Don's one of the greatest artists of all time. Don Ariely. His father created Felix the Cat, and this guy just can draw anything like in 10 minutes. He's just without thinking. Well, Don Ariely, you can quote this, that Don Ariely is the most talented living being on earth. Music, he plays all these instruments. He can write music. He can draw. He can animate. He speaks 5 languages. He goes to Korea to talk to them about animation all the time because his father created Felix the Cat. And they don't realize that when he's in Korea and he's sitting in meetings with these companies that he speaks Korean fluently. So they talk about him in front of him in Korean, thinking this American Italian guy has no idea what they're talking about. And he understands everything they're saying.
My God, that's hilarious.
He'd also work at Energy Studios, which had clients from Linkin Park to Bon Jovi to Jay-Z. His entertainment background is very developed too. Beyond being a co-creator of Coconut Fred, he's also founded MyOuterSpace.com, a partnership with William Shatner, in which the company ran contests with other industry leaders for creatives to showcase their talent. According to Aridi, originally Coconut Fred was going to be pitched to Disney. However, during a meeting with Warner Animation, things changed when multiple companies began to be interested in the idea.
I went in to talk to Warner Animation. I'm talking with Christopher Keenan, who was the vice president of development, senior vice president. And I was pitching him something else. I think I was pitching him some snowboarder animated thing. And he's like, yeah, we see that every day. He goes, well, what else you got in there? I go, well, I got this one thing that I'm developing for Disney. And he goes, well, can you show it to me? I said, yeah, because they haven't bought it yet. And I pulled out a coconut and he went, oh, what is that? Just from a picture. I go, it's Coconut Fred. He lives on an island. It's basically Gilligan's Island, and he's a coconut. He's got the power of creation and ADD, so anything can happen. So it's a tiny little island, and next thing you know, there's a theme park. Next thing you know, there's whatever comes up out of his mind happens, and they're forced to deal with it. He went, we gotta have that. I go, what do you mean gotta have that? Like, just like that? He said, yeah. I go, you're kidding me, right? Is that my own punk? Where's, what's his name coming out? What's his name? Keanu Reeves. What was his name?
Oh, yeah, that guy. I totally forgot. I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. I said, you mean like, you that serious? Should I have my lawyer contact business affairs? He said, yeah, I'll send a message down, have him contact. And next thing you know, I called Don Ariely up. You're not going to believe this. He goes, what? I go, I walked into Warner Animation today and they bought Coconut Fred. He goes, what do you mean they bought it? I go, it's already going into business affairs and my attorney. He goes, who's your attorney? I said, I don't know. I got to find one. I was lucky that I went in that day and I met Christopher Keenan, who fell in love with the project and championed it all the way. I remember after 2 years of, it was like 6 months or more of paperwork just for Warner Animation to make the deal. Then they had to do the Bible, and I had to meet writers and meet everybody, and then there was the animatics, and then there was the pilot that they made, and then that had to be approved by the WB network, which they had to sell it to them. So that doesn't mean just because Warner Animation bought it, it was going to get on the air. So we're now at like year 2.5, wondering what's going to happen with Coconut Fred. And Warner Animation, Christopher Keenan calls me, and I got Don on the phone. He's in Jersey, and we're talking, and Christopher says, I don't have good news for you, Sammy, for Coconut Fred. And I go, oh. He goes, I have great news. I go, you idiot, I could have had a gun in my mouth. Don't do that. I got great news. He goes, it's greenlit. It's going to air. I'm like, wow, we got a show.
If we're basing the creation of Coconut Fred from the interview, we can assume that Coconut Fred was pitched somewhere in 2003, which at this point would still have the afternoon block. but not the morning block, which means less time and the bigger shows will definitely take authority/priority given the smaller time slot. The show was created by Dong Yang Animation, an animation studio working on the creation of Shaolin Showdown, Johnny Bravo, Animaniacs, Static Shock, Proud Family, Batman the Animated Series, and so much more. Given the great track record of this company, it's a solid choice to pick. Although the details are a bit shaky, we're also aware that Chris Battle, known for working on the Powerpuff Girls, Samurai Jack, and Dexter's Lab, and Mindy Allen built out the rest of the characters, creating all of the variations that you would see later on. We'd learned from Battle's Blogspot website as he shared some of the experiences working on the show. It was my first time designing for a Flash animated show, and it turned out to be a fun gig. I was able to draw even looser than ever before, eventually developing a style that emulated one of my favorite Mad Magazine artists, Paul Coker Jr., and famed children's book author Jolly Roger Bradfield. However, like with almost any show, the network does step in and make sure that anything that may push the boundaries too much gets fixed.
If you ever get an animated series, just get used to dealing with network notes. Then we would get notes for broadcast standards. Like when Coconut Fred would be on the beach with Bingo Cherry, and he had a martini glass, like he was having a cocktail. It couldn't have like an umbrella in it or something like that because it looked alcoholic. Notes like this kind of crazy stuff that we had to...
It was at the workaround.
Yeah.
Coconut Fred is produced almost all in Flash and Photoshop, using a blend of photorealism and animation. The show being on a tropical island seems to also focus on warm colors and fruit-centric characters and objects. For example, sometimes the moon can be a fruit, like an orange or a lime. A lot of the characters are fruits or things that you would see on a tropical island. However, calling it a tropical island would be a little bit of a misnomer, as it's also a resort. It has this blend of being a tropical getaway that ironically you cannot get away from. Everything has this tropical resort feel, even the theme song.
And what the funniest story was? When I wrote the theme song, they told me that Sammy, the guy we contracted to do the music for the show, the daily, do whatever, the guys who put the music in every episode. I didn't want to do that. That's not anything I even wanted to do. I said, but I want to write the theme song. So I wrote the Coconut Fred theme song, and I submitted it, and they said, we can't guarantee that because it might be in the contract that we have to use the right. So listen, I'm going to record it to broadcast standard levels. I'm going to submit it. And if this guy comes up with a better one, then use that. I'm fine with that. I go, but if you like this one better, then, what's the deal then? He goes, well, that would be a vote amongst everybody at Warner Brothers. I said, fine, I'm okay with that. We'll see how it goes. I go, he ain't going to beat the one I got. So I submitted it, and then one day they called me in and said, well, we got a verdict on the theme song. I go, what's that? He goes, we're going to use yours. I said, yes! That means more to me than the fact that I created Coconut Fred, because that's my field. I'm a music guy. I've been a music guy all my life. I write music. I was a Bruce Springsteen impersonator in the 80s on tour for 3 years. If there's anything I do know, it's music. If I didn't get that, I would have said, well, that's screwed up. I created a television show. I don't know anything about animation, but a music thing, I didn't get that job. So when they gave me that was like even more exciting for me that I got a theme song than the created by credit of the show.
Although the island is inconsistent with its positioning of everything, as most cartoon settings are, it harbors the general location that you'll see in every episode. Everything from your volcano to pool to tiki huts are all going to be on the island, and since anything that Fred manifests into reality, the setting and location seems to be limited to what is on the island. Granted, the small episode count of the show plus the different ideas that they had really utilized the location for all that was worth. There are other people on the island, however, they can range from being afraid of Fred to being supportive of Fred to being chaotic for the sake of being chaotic, depending on the episode. For example, within Fred Rules, we'd see that upon the infamous rule board being washed away, thus there not being any rules written down, the citizens of Fruit Salad Island would go into a frenzy, presumably doing everything that was previously officially against the rules. This would imply that the rules are written on the board for the citizens as much as they are for Coconut Fred and his friends.
The rules are gone!
Ah, yeah, baby! It's on! No more rule against pie fights.
However, within Master of Disaster, when a volcano erupts, they are understandably panicking, to which everyone except Fred understands the reason why. While Season 1 leaves clues as to why everyone is on the island, there doesn't seem to be a canon reason. So for the rest of this video, assume my use of citizens and captives to be interchangeable, because I have no idea if they actually belong on the island. The episodes are generally built out in your typical episodic format, with a looser plot than normal, giving room for all of the wacky, chaotic elements that Coconut Fred's character brings to the table. It shouldn't be a surprise if the madness that ensues can only be explained as, this is something that Fred did, even though to any normal person this is bizarre. However, while this describes the look and feel of the show, what exactly is the show about at its core? Well, diving deeper into that, Coconut Fred, a wildly imaginative, reality-bending being, has misadventures with his best friends. Slip and Slide the Peel, two bananas that behave largely the same and aren't too bright, Bunga Berry, a dog-like creature that speaks and grunts, Bingo Cherry, generally the voice of reason, Mr. Greenrind, the pseudo-operator of Fruit Salad Island who serves as the authority quote-unquote via his rule board and command of respect from those such as Coconut Fred and Bingo Cherry. There's also a side character, Wedgie, who is generally known for trying to escape the island unsuccessfully. However, does make major appearances within the show when needed. Coconut Fred was set to air 9:30 a.m. September 17th, 2005 as a part of Kids WB's Crash the Backlot tour, which included the first looks at 3 new series from the Warner Bros. Animation division, Lunatics Unleashed, Johnny Test, and Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island, with Lunatics Unleashed seeming to be the big smash hit given its franchise history. It was there where hundreds of thousands of people witnessed the first episode. No news is good news. We'd see that Coconut Fred rises out of bed in a very in-your-face presentation, diving directly onto a drum set, alerting everyone on the island in the brashest way possible that he is awake.
1, 2, 3. Whoops.
Here we see the first example of Wedgie being actively hit, punished, or prevented from attempting or preparing an escape off the island. It will be a running theme for at least the first half of the first season. We'd also see Bingo Cherry, also known as Bingo, give Mr. Greenrind a drink as Greenrind orders Bingo to put no drumming on the squeaky board, a very prominent prop within the series. You would see within many episodes that the squeaky board, while protected by Mr. Greenrind, is the only thing keeping the island from complete chaos. Fred seems to respect the rules due to respecting Mr. Greenrind, and the captives on the island respect the rules as well, despite there being no perceived consequences for not following the rules. Fred would finish off his impromptu drum solo loudly, interrupting Mr. Greenrind's relaxing day, showing 2 people directly affected by Fred's actions.
Hey, Bingo! I'm open for fun! And I have lots of great ideas sloshing around in my head.
Sorry, Fred. I have important work to do for Mr. Greenrind. He said if I helped him out of the cabanas, someday he might even make me tanning consultant.
Of course, given that this goes against Fred's wishes, he pulls out a glue gun, which he believed to be a tanning lotion gun, and glue Mr. Greenrind to the floor, making him unavailable as he orders Bingo to set Fred far away from him so he can enjoy the rest of his day. Already within the first 2 minutes, we've established that quite a bit of the main cast tolerates Fred at best, but has some form of contempt for him at worst, and that's just based off of episode 1. Fred gathers a crew of Slip and Slide, as well as Bunga Berry, and they decide that today they're going to be lifeguards. To describe Slip and Slide is actually rather simple, however I'd like to plant the seed of a particular habit that they exhibit.
What kind of person wears this uniform?
A leprechaun!
Close.
A Spanish teacher?
Warmer. A lifeguard! Where?
As you can tell, they aren't that bright, which is probably one of the reasons they get along with Fred so well. They don't seem to be aware of the fact that some of the things that he can do / manifest can be dangerous towards them. Bunga, however, plays a largely minor role, serving as a voice to bounce off of in many episodes. Despite the episode showing a large number of hints to suggest that this episode is going to be largely about being a lifeguard, because of the fact that a newspaper seemed to hit Bingo Cherry, Fred immediately switches everything over to be a news reporter. The pacing of the episode seems to be intended to match Fred's scatterbrain mindset, so even if it seems that they're doing one thing, it's very plausible that they'll completely switch to doing another thing even if there weren't any hints towards doing that in the first place. I also want to highlight that when Mr. Greenrind said that he was worried, Fred had no idea what the concept of worrying is.
To be honest, Fred, I'm worried.
I've never been worried. Is it fun?
No.
Does it help?
No!
Then why do you do it?
Okay, what's this about a newspaper?
I particularly want to highlight the fact that Fred's basis of if something is worth doing or not is if either it's fun or helpful. However, Fred will later in the series continue to be surprised at the lifestyle of someone who may be more chill, tired, anxious, or really anything other than blindly happy, fun, hyper, and silly all the time. Now, up to this point, you'd make a good argument that everything Fred has imagined so far either falls under the rule of funny or technically was within memory, thus being implied to not exist within their present reality. All of that is now out of the window.
What if pogo stick pirates attacked the island? When suddenly they were all sucked in by a big water snout. And what if a giant octopus tried to put bingo on top of his ice cream sundae?
So when I refer to reality bending, what I mean is that whatever Fred thinks about tends to exist within their version of a real world. I say this because they actually react to it, and these things exist for such a long period of time within the episode that they should be assumed to be actually real and not a part of a joke. And if that's the case, then we have a character that can essentially manifest whatever he thinks into reality. Combine that with this incessant need to have fun, be curious about everything around him, and have a short but often hyper-focused attention on the next shiny thing, and you can kind of see why this show has a chaotic feel. We then see the second appearance of Wedgie within the first episode ever, going back to fix his boat for his attempted escape, and thus is punished once more, setting in the pattern that he will be punished indirectly for trying to escape Fruit Salad Island.
Coconut Fred took a walk down the beach, period. Read all about it!
Help me! Help me!
Suddenly, Fred hears cries for help. Read all about it!
Because of Fred's tendencies to switch between things, his recently started news reporter gig turns back into being a lifeguard when he saves Wedgie, but not before endangering him again because funny. Speaking of funny, Fred then turns his attention back to Mr. Greenrind, speaking in a low tone, suggesting that he can read the room enough to understand that if someone is about to sleep, that he should have a lower volume. However, also hovers over Mr. Greenrind until he notices him doing something inappropriate, in this case picking his nose. Greenrind reacts in a very outlandish way, which is something that he's going to be doing often. Due to Fred's hyper-focus and short attention, he not only writes papers, but alongside others, creates a giant wave of papers that form giant mountains on the island. We then see something that I'll definitely expand on later. One thing about the show is that Mr. Greenrind seems to have a very deep understanding of Fred, both his powers and his personality.
Yes, and I know that when you're excited about something, it's hard for you to quit.
It's impossible. I can't.
Unless, of course, you become distracted by something new that you're also excited about.
What?
It's then when, despite Mr. Greenrind and others steering Fred to become a news reporter, seems to prefer Fred when he was a lifeguard. However, Fred not satisfied with becoming a lifeguard until people are in danger, no joke, Mr. Mel Greenrind instructs everyone else on Fruit Salad Island to get into deep water, especially if they can't swim. Because cartoons, this is amped up with the other aspects that Fred imagined earlier, all of the squids and pirates and things of that nature. Even though he didn't imagine them now, he imagined them before, which again would cement the idea that when he manifests something, it exists within their reality. So now Fred has saved the day, saving people who endangered themselves because they didn't want Fred to pile up the island with more newspapers. So while he did save the day, it was only to inflate his coconut head. More on that later. And of course, to pour salt on the wound, or in this case, lemon juice. Because Greenrind refused to be saved by Fred, he gets lemon juice to the eye. Also, because Fred can never just stop at one deed, he continues his good deed of saving people by saving the pirates and Squid that previously endangered everyone. Because Mr. Greenrind now wants to escape, he gets hit with a newspaper and finally succumbs to the madness and reads about what Fred did, which apparently was saving the day.
Yay me!
This is the first episode to hit everybody's screens as they watched Kids WB. From multiple sources, it seems to at least started out as some type of success, given that a few sources seem to indicate that there was an early success marker, including the creator.
I've seen a million sizzles that people made that shows never got sold that look like great shows. It's just a lot of luck. Coconut Fred was a lot of luck for us, and the people had to love it that watched it because it wouldn't have those kind of ratings. People watched it all the way through.
Right.
Wilson told us all that. We wouldn't have those numbers.
Right, you wouldn't have gotten that Emmy as well.
Despite the glaring issues, the series would push forward given everything is done. Will the series improve from here, or is this the appetizer for a fruitless effort? Bear with me as I guide you through the rise.
There's actually one question that I wanted to add. Was there anything from WB that basically they give you any notes and all that for Coconut Fred while you're developing it? Anything you had to change or anything like that? Or did they give you free reign most of the time?
Well, they let me hire the writers. They brought me a bunch of different writers that they approved to see who I liked to be the showrunner. And they brought this guy in one day named Ray De Laurentiis. And Ray wrote on a lot of stuff for them. But he had this venti Starbucks with probably like 4 shots of espresso in it, and I couldn't even get a word in. I was like, okay, this is definitely the guy. If he can out-talk me, he's the guy. So he brought Coconut Fred to life and was the showrunner, and we put all our ideas together with him, and then he would write the scripts, and we'd all consult on it. So I had the created by credit and a consulting or supervising producer. So we just, he would write the stories and we would give him notes.
So you were basically in the position of making notes and all that.
On every episode,
right.
we gave notes.
To understand Coconut Fred, we must go through the main cast. Although the episodes and the character dynamics were nothing new, to understand why people did or did not like the show, it comes down to the characters you're bound to see throughout the series. Slip and Slide the Peel are the twin best friends of Coconut Fred, with both characters voiced by Eric Balza. The Wikipedia states, quote, "Country Banana Brothers, they are less intelligent than the rest of the cast and often take things a little too seriously. There is no clear way of telling them apart unless Fred or another character identifies just one of them. They're in a band with Fred called Coconut Fred's All Body Sound Band, and their music consists mainly of bodily sounds, burping, rude armpit noises, gargling, etc. They are a banana duo whose personality trait is that they're generally fun-loving, single-think pair that takes many things at face value. And that's even if they're thinking at all. To some, you would say that this character is dumb, and that makes dumb jokes, and basically is to be shown as the person who's behind the pack when it comes to intelligence, and you'd be completely correct. Slip and Slide are characters whose sole purpose within the show is to be proven and shown to be wrong, and not just wrong, but wrong in a way that shows that they're complete idiots.
According to Bingo, the monster has a pointy head, big sharp teeth, and a long tail.
You got him!
Slap, that's a stick.
As you can see, that doesn't look like a monster, but anyone who isn't Slip and Slide would know that from the start. They have a recurring pattern of whatever Fred wants to do to guess, they would guess incredibly wrong. For example, within the first episode, when guessing that Fred wants to be a lifeguard, they guessed wrong purely for the perception of being stupid.
Here's a hint. What kind of person wears this uniform?
A leprechaun!
Close.
A Spanish teacher?
Warmer. A lifeguard!
Where?
They aren't the dumb characters in the way that they may have some redeeming feature about them. From what I can tell, they go through no arc or have no episode that goes into a deep reasoning as to why they are what they are. Unlike equally as silly shows a la SpongeBob, pre-hiatus Fairly OddParents, Regular Show, or even an early Steven Universe or Adventure Time, subjectively, I don't see a charm within their aloofness or naive behavior that makes me want to see them around in other adventures. The fine line between a slow but endearing character and a complete nuisance isn't walked across. Slip and Slide generally don't offer much other than getting things wrong, to a grossly aloof degree. Fred doesn't seem to notice, or mind, or even care that Slip and Slide don't offer much more than their natural sense of enthusiasm, even if it's achieved with a sublayer of stupidity. I say fun-loving because this isn't out of arrogance or malice, but rather an extreme case of ignorance, painting the corner of idiocy that this fruit would rot in. Just because they're dumb, take up space, never offer anything of value to solve a problem, guess things wrong consistently, and can't be distinguished by any nuance of personality, seem to never be affected by Fred's actions, and have a really weird design in general, doesn't mean that they're insufferable. In fact, I think because of the fact that they seem to be rather consistent in the way that they support their friend Fred, plus the fact that they want to have that same kind of random and weird fun too, is what makes them a needed part of the crew, even if it's a necessary evil to a rather bizarre main character.
What do we do now? Mr. Greenrand's made everything against the rules. We could eat sand. Oh yeah, that would be sweet.
In a way, you would expect this show to have a Slip and Slide-esque character, a Patrick to your SpongeBob, a Cosmo to your Wanda, a Richard to your Nicole, but there is a personality attached to these characters, as dumb generally being in it of itself a poor core thing to attach your character to and only have your character to be shown basically just being dumb, especially for the sake of comedy. For a rather common character that's easily messed up in the lower quality spectrum of animated kid shows, Slip and Slide often just acts as the lowest common denominator, acting exactly how you would think, saying the exact joke that you would expect dumb characters like this to be, and serving as a character that will say the run-down, completely cliched joke that any other show would never turn to.
Poop deck.
He said poop.
I sure did.
Slip and Slide serve to be Fred's equally as brain-dead pair, who balance their enthusiastic, fun-loving aloof nature with being ungodly ignorant and redundant in their character. Bungaberry is a main character who largely acts as a pet, voiced by David Kaye. Wikipedia writes Bungaberry as, quotes, a mute, wild strawberry. Bunga communicates exclusively in grunts and growls. Despite this, everyone is still able to understand what he is saying, and is docile enough to interact with other islanders calmly. Bunga is a largely minor character contrary to his supposed main cast placement. Unlike a Gary or Perry, the lack of voice and being perceived more as a pet doesn't bring different adventures that otherwise he should have. He's probably the least interesting character because once you understand that he's just a living wild strawberry who acts as a pet, there's not much more to him. He can serve as the bodyguard or just another character to stand in for Fred's antics.
What is it, Bunga? There's a cantaloupeable hiding behind the bushes?
However, you'd be hard-pressed to find anything significant other than being a muscle sort of character device. It's actually quite interesting given how much he shows up within episodes. He's almost always somewhere within the main crew, but never focused on solo. Probably the only major contribution worth noting would happen around the 11th episode, A Bad Case of the Fruit Cups. The premise of the episode revolves around Mr. Greenrind getting hiccups, and then going through all of the zany ways of getting out of it. Apparently, Bungaberry would have a connection to a walled-off society full of berries like him. Within this episode, we'd see that there is a gated community, an isolated part of the island completely for one species, that seems to give off the vibes of something like a Squidsville, where everyone is living in harmony in a spot that's only there for one species. It appears to be somewhat of a utopia, or at least giving off the appearance of one. Greenrind would meet a character that'd make it eat a weird vegetable, or legume, or some type of something, which would amplify its hiccups rather than suppress or stop it. Beyond this moment, Bungaberry's contribution to the show is largely minor. However, given that he's a part of the main crew that you'll see in almost if not every episode, he was at least worth an overview. A pivotal character within this chaotic marvel of a show is Mr. Mel Greenrine. Voiced by Michael Donovan, Greenrine is, quote, a watermelon. Most commonly assisted by Bingo, Mr. Greenrine routinely attempts to keep everything and everyone in order on the island with his chart of rules, also known as the squeaky board. A lot of the rules on the squeaky board are really nonsensical, but all of which can be applied to Coconut Fred and his friends. Fred has a tendency to get on Mr. Greenrine's nerves and sometimes stress him out from all of his antics, though as the series progresses, he was able to show friendliness towards Fred, which usually wouldn't last long. Greenrine is a very interesting character given that he's probably the yang to Fred's yin. Without Mr. Greenrine, the show wouldn't work at all. He's the straight man, he's the one who wants to be calm and relaxed. He's generally the one who gets the most punished for not following along with Fred's antics. Greenrine isn't exactly an angel himself, he's largely lazy, ordering Bingo Cherry to follow him around and do whatever he wants, and definitely takes advantage of the fact that many people on the island look up to him or at least see him as an authority. He has no actual power on the island beyond this squeaky board, a board that shows up in many episodes, when Fred is up to no good.
Sorry, Fred, but you really have to start reading the squeaky board.
No juggling. You got it, Mr. Greenrine.
I may say this repeatedly, but the squeaky board seems to be the only thing that isn't Fred's morals that actually stops the island from being 100% chaotic. Even though the board doesn't have any intended consequences other than an upset Mr. Greenrine, that board is often used as law, even though there isn't any reason to fear it or Mr. Greenrine. Mind you, Fred can manifest things into reality and thus can easily overpower Mr. Greenrine, who on some level does fear Fred, knowing a lot about his power. The squeaky board seems to also deter the antics of Slip and Slide, and keep general order with the rest of the citizens on Fruit Salad Island. In a sense, the board is an extension of Mr. Greenrine's personality. You can tell that the island is in bad shape when off the 3rd episode, this happens.
Bingo, add no magic for Fred to the squeaky board.
The board's full, Mr. Greenrine.
Well, just erase the no swimming without pants rule.
Yay! Yippee!
It should be said that Fred on some level does respect Mr. Greenrine heavily as someone to look up to. It's actually supposed to be a one-to-one comparison of the intended dynamic that SpongeBob and Squidward also share, where even though Fred is clearly the star of the show and the one who's supposed to be seen in a better light, quote-unquote, than Mr. Greenrine, who often doesn't do much, and what he does isn't really that good, Fred is so blindly in awe of this watermelon that it doesn't matter. However, it's not just Fred, but also Bingo Cherry, who is often at Mr. Greenrine's beck and call, given that a lot of times Bingo does things in the hopes of being promoted. The value of this promotion seems to be non-existent other than an arbitrarily greater amount of respect from Mr. Greenrine. As a character, he seems to be used pretty much just to be a reaction template for Fred's antics, and or the person who gets hit, bumped, attacked, bullied, and all of this is from the lens of it being accidental or all in good fun. So like during the time in which, in the first episode when Fred was a news reporter and caught Mr. Greenrine picking boogers, all in good fun. Or how about the next episode, where he's called out for farting when a giant volcano spawns out of nowhere and is clearly indicated to make the noise.
But what about Melvin?
Mr. Greenrine made a stanky wind.
I did not! It came from the volcano.
But you said we didn't have a volcano.
We didn't.
Or in the next episode, where he has crab arms, and that takes him out of the competition. Or the 4th episode, which is practically dedicated to this entire issue of him being the butt of everything. More on that later. I can go on, but while he's seen in a highlight sometimes, he's also equally disrespected on a minute-by-minute basis, and I can only feel so bad when we learn in a certain episode down the line that he's self-aware that by using Fred's chaotic recklessness as a scapegoat, it shirks him of any responsibility on the island, meaning that he's willfully being punished even if that means not taking any personal blame. Bingo Cherry is a very odd character, despite his perceived normalness. Voiced by Britt McKillop, Wikipedia states that he's, quote, a shy and timid cherry. Bingo usually hangs out with Fred, Slip and Slide, and Bunga Berry. He is easily terrified, something that Fred doesn't know, and usually provokes. Bingo seems to be the youngest of the bunch and is so very different from everyone involved. Unlike Fred, he seems to behave well. Unlike Bunga or Wedgie, he is used often and has a major role within the show. Unlike Slip and Slide, he's actually smart and thinks things through. And unlike Mr. Greenrind, he actually has a lot of good in his heart and will work hard to see things through. He seems to be almost too good for the island, but is commonly used as the lightning rod of Fred's latest antics.
Great treasure digging, Bunga. But you're supposed to wait until we see an X in the sand.
As you can tell, his voice is very much on the younger side, and I think you can easily mistake a voice like that to be something along the lines of a preschool kids show voice. It matches with his general sense of innocence and naivety. I could characterize him very easily to be someone who definitely tries to be responsible when he can, but is often beat down or intimidated. In one of the better episodes, One Bad Apple, the entire premise of the episode is that Butchie wants to bully Bingo. Why does he want to bully Bingo? Is it because of some long line of family feud lineage? Maybe Bingo is seen as the cooler one and Butchie is insecure? Maybe Butchie comes from a bad part of the Fruit Salad Island and this is just how he expresses himself.
Stop it! I'm a bully, okay? And as a bully, I don't have time to play around with you. I have a job to do, and that is to pick on little kids, starting with the smallest and working my way up.
So basically, that's everything you need to know about Butchie, but what makes Bingo shine in this episode, One Bad Apple, is because he's naturally scared but trusts Fred enough to know what he's talking about. Fred, of course, not knowing much about being scared because he's naturally happy and blindly optimistic throughout all of this, frustrates Butchie even more, who wants to take things out on Bingo even more harshly. It's not the greatest example of a child facing a fear, but the general point that this episode tries to get across is that while Bingo is scared of Butchie, and Bingo should and would go on to stand up to the bully in a very unconventional way.
Where are you? Hiding?
Not just hiding, hiding and going boo!
Hide and go foo!
Hide, boo!
Hide!
Boo!
Hide!
Foo! Hide. Hide.
What makes him odd is that he's unnaturally innocent within the show. Bingo couldn't just hide behind the fact that he's ungodly ignorant in the way that Slip and Slide can. He seems to be somewhat aware of Fred's actions and abilities, but also still so innocent to not see the underlying layer of hedonism that goes on within the island. Within the 6th episode, Lemon Overboard, Fred leaves the island to go on a trip with Wedgie. More on that episode later. But at the moment, Bingo had never seen Fruit Salad Island without Fred, which would show that he's young, given that Mr. Greenrind doesn't exactly agree, showing that he may have seen a Fred-less island before. Speaking of, a big part of Bingo's personality is that he respects Mr. Greenrind just as much as Fred, and also doesn't get into trouble on top of that. While he may go along with Fred's tasks and ideas, he's virtually never the one to go overboard, thus making it less fun and more dangerous. There's multiple episodes in which Bingo takes pride in being Mr. Greenrind's personal assistant. Take a look at the episode Fred Rules, when Mr. Greenrind gives Fred and the crew the opportunity to be the quote police of the squeaky board.
Who wants to be a rules ranger?
I do!
Me too!
I swallowed my gum.
Can we all have blue uniforms and badges and whistles?
I suppose.
Can Bingo be dressed like a cowboy?
However, given that this was a task laid out by Mr. Greenrind, it makes sense that Bingo wants to go along with it so well. It should also be noted that within the first 2 episodes, or 4 segments, Bingo was voiced by Tracy Moore. Given that 2 episodes is about 15% of the entire series, that's a pretty big chunk. We don't necessarily know the reason why and didn't get the opportunity to ask already. I'll leave the speculation to you guys. Overall, Bingo is a character that, while innocent and naive, could be just as fun-loving, but is often used as the tiny kid who gets picked on, if not by a bully, then by Fred, while he tries to strive for greatness in Mr. Greenrind's personal circle. Wedgie probably has the best backstory, which balances out his treatment, which is probably the worst of them all. Wedgie is a lemon who works as a sailor. Being washed up on Fruit Salad Island, he has one dream: to get off the island. Voiced by Brian Drummond, this character generally doesn't appear with the rest of the cast, even if he is technically a part of the main cast. A lot of times, he's normally trying to escape or build something to escape in later. His only company most of the time is a wooden figurehead that he calls calls Betty. He's shown in the first episode hammering his ship back together to try and escape, only to be hit by a drumstick that Fred accidentally tossed in his direction. Later on within the same episode, he'd be inadvertently tossed into the water, barely saved, and essentially just be pushed around by a lot of Fred's hyperactive tactics. In short, Wedgie serves as the figurehead of why you shouldn't try to escape and be so abrasive with Fred.
Hey, Bingo doesn't want to come with us. Oh, but not because he thinks you're a bad sailor.
All aboard!
All aboard, everybody! Yay!
He gets most accidents within the show, and for at least the first 4 episodes. They've hammered the point home that not only is he not escaping the island, but he's going to be in a constant struggle all throughout his efforts. In the second episode, Master of Disaster, Fred would wake up again and somehow thwart Wedgie's attempts at escaping again. Within the third episode, a magic-based episode, Fred uses his new magician powers to turn a palm tree invisible, to which Wedgie would rapidly run into, trying to escape. Bear in mind, this would happen multiple times throughout the episode. In the fourth episode, Wedgie doesn't try to escape, but that doesn't stop Fred from accidentally running him over via a roller coaster track that seems to be built directly through his ship. So in that episode, he was just punished for existing. Although he wouldn't appear for every episode, it's easy to assume what he would be used for. However, the most egregious one would be Lemon Overboard. It starts with Fred combing the sand, finding a sailor's whistle. Seeing that he needed a hat, he blows the whistle, causing Mr. Green Rind to fall into the pool due to sand in his eyes, and then he would also approach Wedgie for the first time within this series without indirectly or directly hitting him.
Just watch, Betty. I'll patch up this wreck and sail away to a new island. An island without coconuts.
Hi, Wedgie!
Being bombarded by Fred, I'd noticed that he'd ask Betty for help catching his fall. Given that it's clearly a joke, he'd later talk to Betty directly, seeing that Betty is his only company that he consistently talks to. He doesn't even really associate with Mr. Greenrind, he's almost always to himself, building a boat and trying to escape. Fred, because he found a sailor whistle, now wants to be a sailor. Wedgie then instructs him to build a boat, his dream boat, under the intention that building a boat of that grand concept is going to take him the rest of his life. Unfortunately for Wedgie, Fred can wield whatever he wants to into reality just by thinking about it, and this time was no different. Wedgie realizes that he's stuck at a crossroad. While escaping off the island is everything that he dreamed of, the main reason he wanted off the island is to escape Fred, the same person who would be on the boat. It's a bittersweet escape that he ends up taking, bringing alongside Slip and Slide and Bungaberry. Bingo would have gone as well, but as we'd learn, Bingo doesn't really respect Wedgie as a sailor.
Goodbye! Goodbye, Fruit Salad Island!
This is my first day ever without Fred, Mr. Greenrind. It's giving me a weird feeling I've never felt before.
It's called calm. Bon voyage, Fred! Bon voyage, Fred's annoying friends!
We'd see here that for as long as Bingo has been around, Fred hasn't left the island. This is interesting, as this shows that there are a lot of questions left unanswered about the island. It seems that people/fruit wash up on it, but they very well could have grown up there. Wedgie, for the first time, is happy. He's happy to have the wind breeze through his rinds. It's clear that he loves sailing and would much rather spend his time on the sea than wash the shore. That happiness is interrupted quickly when Fred and Slip and Slide revel in the fact that there's a part of the ship called Poop Deck. Yes, because that totally isn't the lowest common denominator at all. Wedgie would try to distract Fred by giving him other tasks to do and memorize, however, forgetting that Fred has a hyper-focused memory, he'd complete the task not only in seconds, but to perfection. Meanwhile, on the island, something incredibly interesting happens. Bingo tries to warn Mr. Greenrind of an upcoming tension between the captives and how the island is without Fred. It turns out that the island is lacking things that make the island run smoothly.
Don't blame me, it's Fred's fault.
Fred's not here!
It seems that the guests of Fruit Salad Island were happy or at least content with the condition of the island and the services provided due to a common understanding or the embellishment from Mr. Greenrind that Fred was behind all of the bad aspects of the island. In that sense, while he runs the island, it's only so that he can shirk responsibility and relax on the island without distraction or doing any real work. Mr. Greenrind shows himself to be dependent on Fred, even if he does tell him to tone it down sometimes or to do whatever he wants but just somewhere else, where he can't see him and thus isn't affected. We'd also get the character development from Wedgie as well, being annoyed at the fact that Fred won't leave him alone to sail in peace. He has another outburst.
What does it look like? I'm angry!
Angry. Is that the feeling you get when you find taffy in the sand?
No, it's the feeling that makes you so frustrated that you wanna scream.
I don't know that one.
Like not knowing how to rest, Fred doesn't understand anger because it seems like other than curiosity, he's perpetually happy. Even within this episode, Wedgie would ask so, and Fred would state that he's happy all the time, every day. And this is what makes this the best example to show Wedgie. He described the story of how he wrecked his ship. It'd be a normal day as he cruised out of Blueberry Bay. The skies would be clear, as they normally are on a regular day, until a thick storm brewed. He'd be pelted by actual raining cats and dogs, with fog as thick as pea soup, and as he tells the story, it somehow, coincidentally, magically, and possibly happens at the exact same time, almost as if there was a person on board who could manifest these things out of thin air, and would be crazy enough to recreate the process, thinking that it would be fun, when it was really traumatic to another character. After Wedgie snaps back into reality in an attempt to sail through these rough waters, his ship starts to fall apart. We see him broken. Contrast this with when he was happy, now broken. He turns to Fred, who says that he's a good sailor, and they work together for the first time, now seeing that Wedgie has nothing left to lose. All it took was for the exact same scenario that led up to him being washed up on the island to happen again. However, there's a twist that is coming, unless you know how this coconut already acts.
I have to keep my focus. I was doing just fine last time until I heard this strange gurgling sound. I tried to ignore it, but it got louder and louder. It became so maddening that I lost concentration and crashed into the rock.
Then what?
We'd learn that the reason why Wedgie was washed up on the shore in the first place is because of Fred. But more importantly, Wedgie learns this. Every day that he'd tried to escape, not even knowing that the source of what made him crash in the first place is Fred, he's now faced with the being that has trapped him in his own personal hell. It's in that case here where you see Wedgie at his most defeated. Every time that he tried to escape, he now knows that the person who trapped him in the first place will prevent him. Even though this is merely a children's show, it has made you look at Fred in a certain light, given that Wedgie is rarely seen happy because of it. Back at the island, Mr. Greenrind is defeated, seeing that he has no one to blame for the island's condition. Fred would magically come back to Fruit Salad Island, bringing his blend of chaos with him, leaving Greenrind able to use him as his scapegoat again. It's in this sense that both Bingo and Greenrind miss Fred, maybe because they don't know a life without chaos. I'm not even sure.
Having you to blame makes me feel...
Look out for the foo-foo cat. You can blame me if it makes you happy.
Fred, you're to blame.
And you're happy! It's a win-win day. Yay, us!
So what have we learned in this episode? Bingo doesn't respect Wedgie. Wedgie sold out his only company for a chance to escape his soon-to-be-revealed captor. It took Wedgie nearly dying to break him down to work with Fred, as he's never wanted to do so before. Fred is responsible for Wedgie's entrapment in Fruit Salad Island, in addition to preventing his escape. And Mr. Greenrind is just as bad, if not worse than Fred morally, given that he hides behind Fred's actions, which are supposed to be viewed as good intention, just to dodge blame and be lazy. This made everyone look worse throughout the episode, but at least now you see where Wedgie's pain comes from. And that leaves one character, the best for last, the centerpiece of this fruit salad island, the main man or Coconut, the star of the show. Coconut Fred, being the titular character, the protagonist technically, he's known for being the hyperactive, wildly imaginative, blindly optimistic lead with a mixture of short but also hyper-focused attention given the subject. As Wikipedia describes him, a happy-go-lucky coconut with a strange imagination. Fred has the special ability to turn whatever he imagines into reality. He can often be heard saying his trademark catchphrases, "Yay me," and "Now you're talking, Coconut." Voiced by Rob Paulsen, you're either going to love, hate, or tolerate the show based on the perception of this character. Fun fact, we did reach out to Rob Paulsen via the popular service Cameo, however through either being conveniently busy or swamped with other requests, he was unable to answer anything about Coconut Fred at the time. As one of my guys on the team stated,
"Wow, we're willing to pay folks to talk about this and they say nothing. Let that sink in."
I'm getting a little frustrated here.
Relax, you're new. It'll take time to learn everyone's name.
The biggest factor to Fred that you would notice immediately is that he's able to warp things into reality based on his fast-moving imagination. In nearly every episode, he is seen bringing something into reality through a what if, or sometimes even subconsciously. For example, within the first episode, Coconut Fred imagined scenarios for his news reporting job, which included aliens, pirates, and a giant squid. These things are confirmed to be real due to the fact that people outside of his flashbacks deal with the real-life consequences of these dangerous beings. This means that the only thing that moderates Fred is his sense of morality and boredom. If Fred wants to, he could make it day, or he can keep it night. In fact, within the episode Amuse Hotel, Coconut Fred is shown to rig the contest of the hotel he made, presumably in an impossibly short amount of time, to make Mr. Greenrind the winner.
Mr. G, you're my special VIP guest. To tell you the truth, I couldn't imagine it any other way.
You can point to the fact that this could simply be the rule of funny, that it's only funny if the person who didn't want to win does win and leads into the wacky shenanigans that ensue because of it. However, considering that just 3 episodes earlier, he manifested sentient life, I'm pretty sure he can rig a contest pretty easily. Speaking of, towards the end of the episode, he wishes it to be nighttime, and it turns to night pretty much immediately. He's also known for having a short but hyper-focused attention. While he may be scatterbrained in the macro, in the micro, he can fixate on a thing to such a level that he becomes an expert in it within moments. Take the 6th episode, Lemon Overboard, for example. Like I said earlier, Wedgie the Sailor is seen trying not to be the center of Fred's attention, thus giving him a set of locations of the boat to memorize. However, within seconds, he returns learning everything in the process.
Fred, as your first sailing lesson, take this book and memorize the names of every single part of the boat.
Ooh! Here goes! Anchor, bail, bayline, bow, bilge.
Fred can also be wildly aloof but well-meaning. The episode One Bad Apple has a marvelous deep dive into this. The episode deals with a bully who openly calls himself a bully and says his job is to pick on the smallest beings and work his way up, meaning that Bingo Cherry supposedly is going to get whomped at high tide. Throughout this, Fred exhibits every aspect of his personality, except whereas in Amuse Hotel and in Lemon Overboard, there isn't this aloofness aspect of well intent. Here, Fred clearly sees Bingo as a close friend and wouldn't want to see him be bullied. However, because he is incapable of worrying, as we've seen in episode 1, he decides to happily fix the problem. The thing is, knowing Fred, he fixes the issue while simultaneously putting said bully in a position to be bullied throughout the entire episode. Whether it is Fred trying to remind the bully of what his name is despite him wanting to be mean and not remember it, Fred inadvertently poking the bully with chopsticks, or literally manifesting a pink purplish giant to nearly crush him for good, we see here that his reality bending can be used to protect his friends, so it's not just for his own satisfaction and enjoyment.
I still want a piece of you dweebs!
We're Fred and Bingo. That's Dweebs behind you. Hey, Dweebs! I don't know exactly what this means, but Butchie says he wants a piece of you. Well, see ya!
Goodbye!
It's go time, dork.
One great episode to show Fred at his core would be the one that he is most likely the most known for, Master of Disaster. Fred wakes up to enjoy what he calls Paradise Island. It's here where we see Wedgie call Fred dangerously friendly and quickly rushes his escape off the island to a failing result. I do want to highlight, as I did in the Wedgie chapter, that it seems too convenient not to be intentional, given that it doesn't happen when he's not trying to escape the island. Being as over the top and wacky as he is, his good morning launch sends him into Slip and Slide, who instinctively cover their faces with their underwear to hide from Fred. Actually, just kidding. They had no reason to do this. They just did this because they're Slip and Slide and they do dumb things. Apparently, Fred becomes a fashion expert somewhere between this.
They're more than underpants. They're full-body undertards!
Oh, wow. Those undertards are fabulous.
Bingo, hiding under a shell, tries to sneak under Fred's nose, but given that Fred is an all-seeing, all-powerful god of this island, his efforts are futile. All it takes is for Fred to say that he has exciting plans for Bingo Cherry to get into a panic, showing us a montage of all of the silly things that they've done together. It's here where we see such an innocent word, when used or described by Fred, is given a negative connotation. Dangerously friendly. I've got exciting plans. It shows that he has a reputation for being reckless, which, given everything that I've shown you up to this point, there's really no reason not to believe that.
I think I might just rest today.
What do you mean?
You know, rest. Just sit around and do nothing. Rest.
Hey, I don't know that word. Reist. Ruegishk. Reist. Ra.
After going from being a fashionista to silly hats, we get the core of what this episode would be about. Melvin. Melvin is a volcano that is about to erupt. However, the issue is that Melvin doesn't exist. The concept of a volcano on the island is so foreign that not even Bingo knew what Fred was talking about. Bingo has never seen or heard of what a volcano is. Now, of course, Mr. Greenrind tries to circumvent this problem by adding a rule of no volcanoes to his squeaky board full of rules. However, Fred, being the reality-bending, all-seeing, all-powerful god that he is, manifests the volcano anyway, even after reading about the fact that no volcanoes are allowed. It's here where we do see the rare time that the squeaky board is blatantly disregarded, which is interesting, because as I said before, the only thing that really stops Fred from completely ignoring the board and doing what he wants is his respect for Mr. Greenrind and his warped sense of morality. As we know all by this point, given that this is episode 2, Mr. Greenrind explains to us, the audience, that he thinks it's a bit weird to see the pattern of Fred imagining things into a reality that ends up being a bit wacky. And all of this somehow led into a volcano in which now all of the other citizens know about and thus panic.
What are we doing?
Panicking!
We gotta play that game again later!
Of course, given that everyone is pretty much helpless when compared to Fred, Fred comes up with a plan to sing and dance and play music while wearing flowery shirts, and of course that doesn't work. So that's when we get the plan that involves being at the rim of the volcano. One of the most infamous parts of this episode, and thus this show, happens here, because it's a clear case of missing what can make certain characters do something or get away with something. While Mr. Greenrind, very concerned for his own personal safety, followed Fred's instructions, even his joke instructions. When told to whistle a happy song with crackers in his mouth, he accidentally shoots watermelon seeds into Fred's face. Now, as you know, Fred isn't that capable of anger, disappointment, or any natural reaction to having seeds spat in your face. So he reacts in a calm way, still happy, and that makes him seem scarier. However, the scene directly cuts to this one right here, where this happens.
Now, according to the scroll, one of us has to jump into the volcano. Oh, choose me! Choose me! Oh, choose me! Lucky!
It'd be foolish not to see that this came directly due to Mr. Greenrind accidentally spitting watermelon seeds in Fred's face. He doesn't even seem to be affected that he accidentally bumped into Mr. Greenrind and made no attempts to save him. It's clear that if you cross Fred, or even do something that would make him seem like he would be sad naturally, later you would suffer a consequence, which is very unsettling. It gives a very unsettling vibe towards the show. Given that he landed on a ledge, I'm not sure if that's because of luck or because Fred wouldn't let him die until he outlived his entertainment use. What I do know is that Fred, upon getting lava on his head, inflates and plugs the volcano, even though it doesn't really have anything to do with being a coconut or anything. It's just a thing that Fred decided to do because Fred is capable of doing anything. Wedgie, in his second appearance within this episode, tries to escape the island only to be stopped again. However, here's where things get interesting. That pillar of lava that hardened due to Fred, I guess, plugging up the whole of the volcano, causes the entire island to be bonked underwater. The show has a very creative way of dealing with proportions, but I think this is the most interesting one yet.
Fred! These stupid hats of yours saved our lives.
They're silly hats. Stupid Hat Day isn't until next month.
I just want to highlight that Fred only gave the main crew hats, so it's safe to assume that when Mr. Greenrind said that these hats saved their lives, that the other people on the island weren't as fortunate. Well, I hope they're in a better place now. We then see a whirlpool because, and a happy volcano because. If the episode was trying to show that Melvin wanted a great time or wanted to be in the ocean, it did a terrible job at communicating that. I'm more than willing to go with the theory that Fred's all-seeing, all-powerful self just made Melvin happy after killing everyone else on the island, and this is his war victory song.
It wasn't Melvin. Mr. Greenrind. Well, now a wowie fooey pooey, Mr. Greenrind went kablooey. Blah, 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 blah. Yay, me!
The Master of Disaster is the best way to describe Fred. He's able to wield such powerful forces while retaining a calm and happy and blindly optimistic viewpoint, much to the detriment of certain people. His wildly imaginative side clashes chaotically with this hyper-focused attitude towards the smallest things. It's in that aspect that Fred is the centerpiece of whatever you wish to call this. A series, an acid trip, an unethical experiment about power dynamics. He is the core of why things are what they are. This show would be drastically different without Fred. Would it be better? Would it be worse? That's for you to decide. Well, without further ado, let's go into The Fall. Although some may want to slap this show with it's bad and then move on, I feel like that's a little disingenuous. There's been multiple shows that have been labeled bad that don't get this treatment, to be shelved within 2 years and have their second season cut.
The rise and fall of Coconut Fred is basically Coconut Fred overreached the goal that they thought it was going to have by hitting an average of 3.7s when they thought it was only going to do 2s. They would be happy if it was going to be 2s. They thought 1.8 would be a blessing, make the network happy. And then when it hit that,
like it was riding high, but basically
it was riding real high. So when they canceled it the next season, the executives at Warner Animation were throwing papers in the air, walking up, well, what's going on? That doesn't make sense. And then, higher up realized the network's going to go down. We can't license. So Coconut Fred is just going to cost us. It's going to cost millions of dollars to make 2 more seasons that we're not even going to have a home for it. Let's put more money into Scooby-Doo right now.
As I explained with the exposition, Kids WB at this point was going downhill. Even though the network portrayed itself as having a grand opening of new shows, this was just their last resort at trying to gain support from affiliate networks and renegotiate spots to feature more programming. Mind you, at this point their morning block is gone, and their afternoon block would be going away just soon after Coconut Fred debuted. The way that Already sees it is that Coconut Fred was too successful, and that's what caused it to fail.
After that, they knew that the block was going down because there was only 1 more season and the block was going to be shut down. The whole Kids WB, and they sold it to, what was it called, 4Kids?
Yeah, I remember 4Kids Entertainment. Like, they were big for a time, but then by the end of their turn, they basically were selling things off, basically go to a different company at some point.
Right.
Then it hopped around.
The internet was exploding. Warner Brothers decided to go digital. But the classic Kids WB, that Saturday morning block, that Fred got in on 2005-2006 season and was the highest rated show. Then that next season was going to be the last year. So Warner Brothers decided it's going to take us 3 years to market Fred into, serials and whatever they're going to do for licensing. Because it took SpongeBob 3 years.
Now, while there aren't many sources beyond web-archived press releases that can confirm the early success of Coconut Fred, let's assume this to be true. It makes plausible sense that Kids WB wouldn't have been able to keep Coconut Fred because there's another show on that didn't necessarily stay on Kids WB, Johnny Test. Some of you may know this show only from Cartoon Network, however it initially aired on Kids WB. Ironically, my source that confirms Coconut Fred's ratings performance is from a Lunatics Unleashed press release from Warner Media, then called Time Warner. Quotes, "The zany new comedy Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island, also from Warner Bros. Animation, performed strongly, ranking amongst the top 5 broadcast spots from Kids 2 to 11, 2.0 out of 9, Kids 6 through 11, 2.8 out of 12, Boys 2 through 11, 2.4 out of 10, Boys 6 through 11, 3.9 out of 16, and Girls 2 to 11, 1.6 out of 7. And ranked amongst the top 10 overall spots including cable in tweens 9 through 14, 2.9 out of 14, and male tweens 9 to 14, 4.6 out of 22, end quote. Granted, everything in this article is about how they are to top everything in every key demographic, so take it as you will. However, do note that if we are to consider these numbers good, it lines up with his explanation. However, what the press release and his reasoning lacks is that if these shows were doing well, why didn't the block do well? How could the block outperform the competition, but then not outlive the competition? And speculating here, but is it possible that while the network did well, it didn't hit the numbers that the higher-ups wanted and thus didn't allow for more funding or focus towards the network? You'd have to remember that this is 2005, and while great shows were out at the time, the perception of animation was a lot lower than it is now. Coconut Fred is an Emmy-nominated show, yes, but let's look at the other nominations. The Batman, The Save-Ums, Teutonstein? These aren't the shows you would think of in 2005. SpongeBob was coming back after the first movie. South Park was still a big show. American Dragon, Jake Long, Foster's Home, Camp Lazlo. Why didn't any of these shows get nominated? Well, you see, this is because Coconut Fred was nominated for a Daytime Emmy, whereas the Primetime Emmy nominations went to animated shows you would think of: SpongeBob, The Simpsons, Samurai Jack, Family Guy, and the winner, South Park. So we have a case of the ratings being high when viewed in a vacuum, and the Emmy nomination looking great still, but put into the context that its competition was rather underwhelming. You get a more accurate picture of what's going on. And it's not like Warner Bros. Went anywhere after this, but it seems like they decided to divert all of their attention into Cartoon Network, which, while smart, seemed to come at the cost of the show.
I remember I used to walk into Nickelodeon to try to sell them other shows, and they would look at me like, "You ripped off it." I'm like, "You guys are nuts." I go, "I didn't do anything. I drew a character. I had a character, created an idea. And then there was a studio, and then there were writers, and then there were, it's at some point it's not even in my hands."
I'd like to call this section the curse of the confused demographic, but a better name would be the SpongeBob effect. Coconut Fred's key demographic included kids 2 to 11. Think about that for a second. This show was to be put up against shows like Sesame Street and Blue's Clues. The show about a coconut rampaging around an island showing no moral values other than one's personal gain. I know this because the press release made it clear to show that it's performing well in those demographics and labeled the entire release as key demos. This makes Bingo's voice make sense, given that he sounds like a voice you would hear from a show in that demographic. In fact, many times throughout, you get that vibe heavily, that this is marketed towards a very young demographic. They use a very simple language and a welcoming tone that you wouldn't see anywhere from any other contemporary. If we were to compare it to SpongeBob, yes, there are episodes like Your Shoes Untied or Subs, episodes with a very simple premise, that does seem to be a lot more inviting to a lower age than usual. However, even with those episodes, you can make a convincing argument that while the intended audience was children, you can enjoy those episodes at any age. One frustrating piece of misinformation that is often shared is that just because animation is primarily directed towards kids, is that the show itself needs to market itself and write and view everything from the lens of the show being for kids. This isn't true, and a lot of shows went out of their way to not do this and are seen actually in a higher light. Regular Show, SpongeBob, Adventure Time, Phineas and Ferb, Flapjack. These are shows that technically are on networks that market towards children, but you can enjoy these shows at any age due to the fact that these shows write their episodes for anyone to enjoy. Contrast this with the Sesame Street or Blue's Clues, which intentionally and explicitly writes with a language directed towards young children. I think Coconut Fred's mistake is believing that since SpongeBob is a big show with children, that the show must have been written in a way to speak only to children. The only reason SpongeBob has such a longevity and legacy is that while children love it, so do teens and adults, especially teens and adults who grew up watching SpongeBob, because it's enjoyable for all even though it's marketed towards one section. It's an easy to understand concept, but seems to be practiced uncommonly. However, beyond that, there's also just a rehashing of things that happen on or within SpongeBob. You have a main character with a catchphrase on a nautical environment who loves to have fun. Mr. Mel Greenrine, a grouchy, lazy character, often looked up to by Fred and others, in a very similar fashion to Squidward. And add in the fact that Mr. Greenrine plays the bagpipes poorly, but he thinks he plays well, and he always wants to relax, and you can see the similarities. In episode 8, he would have a long to-do list to want to help everyone in the way that SpongeBob did. Hell, 5 nuts and a baby is essentially a watered-down rockabye bivalve. However, one thing that SpongeBob at the time had that Fred lacks is this authentic sense of morals. SpongeBob at the time, at least, had a wider set of emotions. He could be happy, but he could also be scared, angry, sad, or even jealous. Coconut Fred, as you've seen throughout the whole series, is just one side of SpongeBob, the most popular side, but still just one side. It's also the side that you would see if you were to look at SpongeBob from a surface level. Despite giving this show a critical look through the interview given with Sammy Aridi and looking more into Don Ariolo, their back catalog of work leads me to believe that they're mega talented. When you look at Dong Yang Animation, their back catalog of work leads me to believe that they're mega talented. When you look at Warner Bros, even Kids WB, when you look at their programming, I can believe that there is quality behind the network and the people who work there are mega talented. So what exactly went wrong with Coconut Fred? I have a giant speculation, so treat this no bigger than a theory on my end. You see, there's generally 2 parts to a thing: the idea and the execution of the idea. However, when you split up the idea, you have things such as the foundation or the underlying factors of the idea, and then even the overview or just the conceptual part of the idea. I know we're getting meta here, but hear me out. When you have a very lofty or ambitious idea with no foundation, like I want to solve world hunger, the idea itself is there, but there's no foundation. It will fall apart in execution because you don't know what to do. You just have the idea, but you don't know how to execute the idea. It's not that the idea is dumb. I don't think rational people would say that the idea of ending world hunger is dumb or can't work, but there is no basis to the idea other than these conceptual, lofty, in the cloud sentiments. With Coconut Fred, there are multiple conceptual parts of it that can and have worked before. We've had shows in which things are magically brought to life. We've had shows about people who are stuck on islands. We've had dynamics in which, while the main character may be optimistic to the point of either being annoying or aloof, people enjoy their company. All of these aspects of Coconut Fred work, but when you look at the foundation, it's a mess. Things such as redeeming features, fleshing out the side characters, quality of life adjustments, all of these things are ignored, possibly because of the assumption that kids won't care, and in a sense, if they were successful, you would be correct. They wouldn't care, but that's just a thing. You actually need them to care, and those foundational aspects are what brings a show to life. When I look at another Rise and Fall video, the Danny Phantom one, I singled out season 3 because it was the only season that didn't have much help from Steve Marmel, an important factor to Danny Phantom as a character and show, thus leading the season to be the worst because it chopped off all of the nuances, the subtleties, the quality of life foundations to the show and character. There's a balancing between teen ghost fighter and a supernatural teen struggling with his identity and balancing those problems through an over-enthusiastic parent group that wouldn't understand and hunt his kind, an overachieving sister who came around to understand the horrors of public education, and a society that sees him as an average kid but ends up having fun with his friends, one of which he would grow to like romantically as the time comes. The former is season 3 depicted of Danny, and the latter is why people would go on to enjoy Danny in the first 2 seasons. And my theory is that Marmel was the person who added the foundation to Butch Hartman's idea in Danny Phantom. Not to say that Marmel didn't have his own great ideas, I'm pretty sure he did, but clearly without him, Hartman and the team didn't have that grounding figure that would make sure that the foundation was maintained in Marmel's absence per episode. That B person was sorely needed for Coconut Fred, because when you look at the show, not from the surface level, nothing is there, and then you start to wonder, then why would I watch? It doesn't go anywhere. It's not really that funny, and the characters don't seem to like each other for anything else other than these are the main characters. And you don't even know why they tolerate Fred logically in story. A solid B person on the team who thought about those tiny things and those tiny questions that viewers would have, which isn't flashy, it's not fun, it's not always a creative endeavor, and sometimes it's not even visible, but these things are definitely noticed when removed. It's like adding reverb to a song. Without it, the song will sound empty, but if there's too much of it, then it'll be too noticeable. It's clear to me that Sammy Aridi had a lot of ambitious and creative ideas for Fred, just in my opinion. Just by hearing him talk about the music of the show alone.
When they greenlit the theme song, that was like, that meant more to me, because I was fighting for that.
That really sucks. Oh.
Well, yeah, for me, because I don't make any money. I didn't make any money. You know, I wrote the theme song for Coconut Fred, and I made more money from that than I did from Coconut Fred. They don't pay me anything for that.
Really? Like from the theme song, most money came from the theme song, not from the rest of the show.
The royalties I made from the theme song being played through ASCAP were 10 times the fact that I was the creator of whatever the creator gets paid. And I split that with Don, who drew Coconut Fred.
I don't know everyone who worked on the show, or the conditions, or the pitch bible, or whatever they did to maintain the internal lore or logic of the show, but what I do know is that based off of the final product, the idea of any weight or depth or internal consistency with the characters that were away from the main selling point is gone. Slip and Slide have no depth. Bingo Cherry has no depth. Mr. Greenrind has no depth, and people would tend to think that depth has to be this grand backstory, but it could be very simple. Look at Mrs. Puff in SpongeBob. She's not the most used character, but over time you've had quite a lot of times to peer into Mrs. Puff beyond being just the anxious boating teacher who doesn't like SpongeBob behind the wheel. There's legitimate things you can say about her and her personality that doesn't come from the obvious fear of SpongeBob's driving. That's what gives these characters weight. And musicians can be great writers, if the singer-songwriter category is anything, and that's just one genre out of the many. Businessmen can be great writers. However, there are times where someone who is really good at music, or someone who is really good at business, could really use that secondhand person who was more gifted at writing, in the way that Sammy was really good with music, and Don was good at art. Because the more the team spoke with Sammy, in my opinion, Sammy seemed more like an ideas guy who was really confident in his business ability.
And then I realized the power of merchandising and stuff like that, and realized that the real money that I was ever going to make if Coconut Fred continued would have been in, dolls and toys and all that kind of stuff, maybe fruit juices. I used to take meetings with Sunkist to see if I can get them in early and be part of it. But, it was just a learning experience for me to see what that's all about. And then when I went into CVS and saw Nickelodeon was doing a birth control device, a contraceptive SpongeBob, I thought that was very interesting marketing, that they would go after the young girls and so they wouldn't get pregnant with a contraceptive SpongeBob.
Mm-hmm.
That's another joke. You can use that one too.
And I mean this with the utmost respect, but some people are not one-stop shops, myself included. Even though I write, record, and now partially edit for this channel on top of doing the marketing, accounting, and legal work and all of that, there's a lot of stuff I can't do, like draw well. There's a lot of things I delegate, drawing being the most obvious, and one thing I often think about is if I were to delegate, I'd like the person that I would give the task to have a similar range of skill as I would if I was doing something else. I dare say I write and edit great for YouTube standards, so I wouldn't want that ruined with someone who has subpar artistic skills. So if you get where my analogy is going, is that even though Don is a good artist and Sammy is a great musician, even with a great artistic mind, even with a great musical mind, even with a great business mind, and an animation machine, Dong Yang Animation, if the writing isn't good and the world building and character development is subpar, it'll show, and it did. Perhaps the biggest contributor to the fall of Coconut Fred is the titular character himself. I can go on about the massive flaws in his character or the deep underlying reason why his dynamics don't work, or even the eerie and genuine positivity he seems to evoke that masks his hedonistic, ethical egoism, but I would like to walk you through the last episode I'd like to cover within this video. It's not the worst episode, it's not the worst ending, it's not even the worst depiction of Fred, but it is the most accurate depiction of him, and that's Amuse Hotel. It starts with Fred loudly building and waking everyone up within the middle of the night. Mind you, it seems like he's been doing this for some time, and he's depicted as having no self-awareness towards people's privacy or moral right to sleep. While Mr. Greenrind would encourage Bingo to write a new rule that Fred isn't allowed to get excited before the sun comes up, it's a pointless effort. Also, might I add that this episode goes against multiple others that show that Bingo has a home, and that Mr. Greenrind doesn't necessarily like guests, but that's beside the point. It's a pointless effort to add rules when the person you're trying to guide to behave a certain way is able to wield the world to however he likes, and is just being nice to you because of some unexplained level of respect.
Oh, I hope the sun comes up soon. Yay!
So begrudgingly, everyone gets up to hear Fred's new idea. Despite the lack of sleep, which does prove to be a consistent, albeit minor setback for Fred, he's worked on the idea for an Amuse Hotel, an amusement park / hotel hybrid, created so that he didn't have to decide on what to do today. Despite the fact that Mr. Greenrind wants to relax as he theoretically would on any other day, because Fred, he's now subjected to being a part of this. Tack on that extra screw you when Fred raises the flag that naturally follows him as the shade being very bad for watermelons, or really a lot of fruit. So of course, Mr. Greenrind doesn't want to go in the Amuse Hotel, everyone is invited, and they push him in to go as the captives are both annoyed and upset but weirdly supportive of Fred's mindset and antics. Fred announces that a lucky visitor will win VIP access to having Fred be their guide throughout the Amuse Hotel. Given that Mr. Greenrind doesn't want to go, doesn't want to be picked, doesn't even really like Fred all that much, you could see where this is going.
Please don't let it be me. Please don't let it be me.
Let it be Mr. Greenrind, let it be Mr. Greenrind.
You're killing me, prune lady.
No! Mr. G, you're my special VIP guest. To tell you the truth, I couldn't imagine it any other way.
Considering that it's already been proven that Fred can wield things into being real just by thinking about it or saying it, especially because he would go out to flat out outright say, that he thinks that there was no one else who deserved the VIP treatment. He couldn't think of anyone else. So of course, Fred is now obligated through his mind to stay next to Mr. Greenrind for the entirety of his trip until he is, quote, the happiest guest ever. This means yelling into his ear, getting a parody of Britney Spears named Tiffany Peer to sing in his ear, and instructing him to get on the Nutmare. Yes, Nutmare, the roller coaster he seems the most proud of anything within the Amuse Hotel, when all Mr. Greenrind wants to do is get warm because comedy. And because comedy, the flag followed him inside. Mind you, throughout all of this, it's supposed to be perceived as funny. You are supposed to find Fred to be a great character. Dragged against his will, Fred takes Mr. Greenrind onto the roller coaster, which just so happens to go through another character's home.
Betty, who put these roller coaster tracks through my boat?
Mind you, Wedgie hasn't done a single thing in this episode. However, given that in all of the other episodes he was shown to try to escape, you can tell how the world and show wants you to feel when it comes to Wedgie's character. Of course, not wanting to be on the roller coaster, he is now talking in puke-filled shoes, wearing regurgitated pudding-filled shorts. He's smacked around by the old woman that he ran over earlier to escape the shade, and Fred looks at him as if nothing happened, the happiest he has ever been, as like I said in 2 sections ago, Fred isn't allowed to feel any emotion other than happy and technically curious, if you want to call that another emotion. If you want to count tired as an emotion, then there you go, the trifecta of Fred's emotions. He isn't allowed to have the nuanced thinking that he's maybe doing something wrong, because it's not fun to accept blame. It's not fun to take responsibility for your actions. So why even do it?
Yay, Mr. Greenrind! You found the tanning salon. Okay, just knock on the door when you've had enough. Are you still cold?
Because it would have been a nice thing for Fred to take out Mr. Greenrind before he was glowing hot, because moderation doesn't exist, Fred of course falls asleep because it would have been funny to just repeat the exact same sentiment. Everything that I'm showing you here is the same. Whatever Mr. Greenrind wants, Fred beats it out of him directly and indirectly until Greenrind accepts things, and then is given a subpar version of what he wants. He wants to go to the pool? Fred takes him to the whitewater rapids instead, because that's more fun to him. It's just a kick to the melon seeds whenever you hear exactly how Mr. Greenrind reacts to believing he got what he finally wanted with no strings attached.
It's good to see you happy, Mr. Greenrind.
Well, it's good to be happy, Fred. Why do I feel that it just can't last?
I'm not saying that Fred is a psychopath or that Warner Bros are evil or even that kids would be corrupted or crying when they see this. I believe realistically this may be something a kid would watch, maybe not get attached to, but definitely watch. However, when you get older, realize how messed up the show is with no underlying factors or great arc or funny characters. You'll remember it as I see it today, a chaotic mess that has no redeeming factors to enjoy it anymore. Billy and Mandy is also a pretty messed up show when you think about it. However, I enjoy it because it's actually funny. It's an awesome horror themed show, but Grimm got put through the ringer for our enjoyment, and who cares? He's a fictional character, and it's a funny show. Here, it's not even funny after a certain point. Why would I find this character just getting beaten up and everything taken away from him funny after a while? Even the most pathetic, repulsive worm that the internet laughs at has to, at some level, have a bite back for it to be entertaining. Think of the scummiest people who are at their lows. There's still some level of aggressive ignorance or blind arrogance that they have that fuels people to hate on them. Greenrind isn't even that. He's not arrogant or mean to Fred. He's not even a bad guy, all things considered. He's just the target for Fred's self-serving plans. Of course, Fred, still having no sleep struggles, falls asleep finally. Greenrind can get some peace, or at least the audience can get another aspect of the show or the characters or the concept of the episode or some world building or really anything else. But you have to remember that this is Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island, and nothing, not even the concept of needing sleep, will stop him. Getting in the bungee elevator because comedy, Greenrind is understandably shaken given the thought that he escaped Fred's wrath, but also launched into the solar system and back.
Why are you shaking, Mr. Greenrind? Are you cold again? Do you want to go back to the tanning salon?
No! I'm shaking because I just got shot 500 feet into the air inside an elevator!
You're shaking from excitement! You want to take another ride? You want a snow cone, ice cream, or pony ride?
No! I can't take it anymore, Fred. I've gotta go.
He understandably snaps and rushes out of the hotel. However, once again, this is Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island. Therefore, you can never escape Fred, even when you thought you did. Thus leading into an electronic Fred parade, which just so happens to be the parade themed after Mr. Greenrind, the VIP guest. That if you were originally saying that him being the VIP guest was a coincidence, you would also have to assume that this parade that he magically made out of nowhere was just a coincidence, and that it was themed after this specific person, even though it was supposed to be a random VIP guest. I don't know what Mr. Greenrind did to Fred in a previous life, but I do know it must have been really, really bad. I'm talking horrible. Oh my god. Of course, finally, after every part of the Amuse Hotel has been exhausted because it's the end of the episode, Mr. Greenrind is finally given his opportunity to relax in a hammock. However, at the downside of now, Fred turning it to night, leaving him in the cold. That is the legacy of Coconut Fred. After he's done with you, then he'll give you a subpar version of what you want. How poetic. Some of you may have noticed that I seem to repeat episodes heavily within this Rise and Fall, given that there are 13, technically 25 segments. This is because while I have footage of season 2, it's not exactly great. Imagine all of the obscure shows that are properly archived. And then you have this. This is the best footage I can find of season 2 of Coconut Fred. Even if you are a die-hard fan of this show, this is basically the first year or second year of YouTube early Let's Play content. It has the same quality. That is what you have. Someone recording a screen. That is it. After a 6-month break between season 1 and 2, the last 7 segments of Coconut Fred would air in May of 2006. This show would be pulled off from the shelves, and soon would the entire network.
Alright, and then when the show was canceled, Warner Brothers had 5 or 6 entities out there, Cookie Jar, and a lot of big animation houses wanting to buy it from them. Saying, hey, it's a hit show, we'll buy it from you. But, then they got greedy and they wanted too much money for it. I'd still have the show on the air. It might be in its 10th season by now if Warner Brothers would have sold it to someone who wanted to make it for another network. But you know what happens is, same thing happened with Family Guy. It got canceled and then it came back. So what would probably happen is if Warner Brothers sold it for like $1 million or so to a company and they made a deal and then it became a huge hit, they'd look stupid.
Yeah.
Why did they do that? Then someone would have got in trouble. So it's better for them just to, rather than put $1 million in the bank that they don't need, isn't going to change their life. It's like, keep it in the vault and not let it get famous and make us look stupid.
Right.
Can you imagine if the first or second year Nickelodeon canceled because they tried 3 times to cancel SpongeBob, and then if they did, someone else picked it up and it became what it is? Somebody in Nickelodeon who did that, they'd be fighting over it for years. The person who canceled it wouldn't be able to get a job anywhere.
Oh yeah, well, they did something similar when it came to Adventure Time, where it's like Nickelodeon basically booted that show off, Cartoon Network picked it up, and it went on for 10 seasons.
Right, exactly. No one has a crystal ball that knows what they're gonna. It's everybody trying to hang on to their job. It's easier to say no and not get in trouble than to say yes and get in trouble.
Even I'm surprised that I can talk about this show for so long, given that it's actually rather short and brief histories scattered across the internet.
If I go back to YouTube and tell them to turn my channel back on, they shut my whole channel down because of Coconut Fred. They said you have copyrighted. I go, what do you mean copyrighted? I own it.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
It's mine. So they turned my channel off. I can't even log into it. I don't even know how. I gotta call somebody who knows YouTube people. And maybe they'll fire it back up. But if they do, and if I have all the comments that were on that channel and the messages people sent me, if you printed those, you wouldn't believe it.
Oh my.
It was ridiculous. And I would send them, I said, why are you guys even bothering? That was 2005, 2006. It's 2013. It's 2014. What are you doing with your life arguing about Coconut Fred?
That's insane. We would love that if we could get those comments.
There were guys that were sending a petition that they said, can we do a petition? We want to get 10,000 names of. I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Go get them, and we'll give it to Warner Brothers. Sure, they'll put it back on.
And it seems doomed to stay that way if Warner Media has anything to do with it. To write this show off as just another bad show would be a lazy man's viewpoint. It has a lot of interesting history, and the fact that there is documented evidence of it doing well seems to lead me to believe that there is a little bit of revisionist history here.
Now that it's 2020 and all that, if you could go back in time and just start Coconut Fred again, would there be anything you'd change about Coconut Fred at all?
If I went back to do Coconut Fred again, I would think that, well, you know what, I went back to Disney Channel and talked to Adam Bonnet after Coconut Fred got 2 Emmy nominations and the whole channel only got 1. And I said to Adam, so it wouldn't work, huh? You tell me it wouldn't work. Look at the ratings. You were looking for something that competes with SpongeBob. There you go. It competes with SpongeBob. And I said, Adam, if you would have bought this and it were on the Disney Channel every day like a cable show, then it would be the hit that SpongeBob is. But the fact that it was only on Saturdays on Warner Brothers network, so that would be the thing to go back. I think Coconut Fred would have had a longer life on a cable channel that kids could watch it every day rather than once a week on Saturday mornings at 7:30, 8 o'clock.
Yeah, especially 7:30, 8 o'clock.
Right, and that's what I always told Disney. I said, man, this would be such a huge hit on your channel.
I believe that this show would have done a lot better if it was on another network like Disney. Would it have been a juggernaut? Would it have gone on to have its 10th season? Most likely not even with good support. However, it would have been on a network that was stable, had access to air every day, in some cases all days, and most importantly, had access to world-class talent that each 3 networks scoured the interwebs in order to find now to this day. You can attribute the fall of Coconut Coconut Fred to many things, but if we use a broader scope, Kids WB was not the home for animation, whether it was good or bad. As much as we'd like to sweep this show under the rug, do remember that there was good programming on Kids WB as well. This one just so happened to win an Emmy.
And then when it got 2 Emmy nominations, my lawyer told me, he said, Sammy, you created a show that got 2 Emmy nominations. No one can ever take that away from you. So go on and make me more money. So that's it. That's the Coconut Fred story.
Finally, we're done with the Coconut Fred story. Yay me. I want to thank you guys for being so patient, plus the entire team that I have with me. They've done an incredible job. Without them, this project wouldn't have even come to light. I want to thank Toongrin for assembling and conducting the interview, and also just taking this project and making it 100% better. If you want to thank anyone in addition to myself, please guys, I would love to see a lot of thanks for Toongrin. They did an amazing job at assembling this video. I could not ask for a better duo to help me out with video production. They have really taken a lot of my later rise and falls and turned them into something that's even bigger than all of us. I also want to thank my art team, in particular Neon Werewolf, for creating the stills for Taylor and Sammy. I want to give a big shout out to all of the editors that have worked on this, and also Lauren, who has been an irreplaceable help throughout all of this. Well, that is the story. Thank you so much for your time, and as always, take care. Alpha out.